All right, so I know I'm treading into dangerous waters with this topic, but I just kind of want to give a few pieces of information and add some context to a conversation that's been all over Twitter the last few days, especially given the fact that there's a lot of really strong opinions. And while I have my own opinions and I'll try to keep mine as fact based as possible, I think it's important to understand context when you're looking at a situation as serious as the subject at hand, being surrogacy, and the ethical dilemma around whether or not it should or shouldn't be a practice that we at least allow commercially. I think most people can accept the fact that if you can't carry a child and you have a sibling, a sister that is willing to carry you and your husband's or you and your wife's child or whatever, still kind of a weird situation for me personally. I wouldn't ask my sister-in-law to do that, my sister to do that, whatever. But again, I guess that's the least extreme of the version of the situation. It's the least extreme possibility. When you get to where you have people that are doing it commercially as a business transaction, that's where I think a lot of people have a bigger issue with it. So let's talk about the actual subject of this video first, and then we can give some context afterwards. So this guy who I know nothing about until today, well, the last few days, Shane Dawson and his husband Rylan Adams. Shane Dawson got famous on YouTube around the time that I was busy working and raising kids. So honestly, I never knew this guy's name before recently. I had heard of Jeffree Star, and of course, Jeffree Star, very controversial person. Both these guys were very big on YouTube, Makeup World and all that. And because they were friends, compatriots, if you will, no pun intended there, basically, they've both been effectively canceled from YouTube due to the fact that there's a lot of weird crap that they've got involved in. And we'll get into some of that in a little bit here. But Shane Dawson and his husband, Rylan Adams, had twin boys via surrogate. Now, there's a video of the two of them talking about it. Basically, this gets into the moralistic religious side of things that I really don't want to focus on in this video, because that's not the point. But they created 10 embryos, fertilized them. The doctor said, okay, out of both of you guys, the best possibility if we were going to use both of your fertilized embryos is to use one of each yours, both boys, because the female ones were inferior, apparently. Because Rylan's sperm, I guess, was inferior. I don't know. I'm not going to say anything. So, that being said, they put 2 fertilized embryos in their surrogate, and they left with essentially fraternal twin boys. Now, you can get into the character of Shane. I know nothing about Ryland, but Shane has said and done some really disgusting things. Honestly, I don't know if they tried to adopt and they were rejected. It's very likely due to the fact that Shane's past is really gross. I'm talking having 12-year-old girls twerk for him on webcam chat rooms and saying really disgusting things to his underage cousin and all sorts of stuff, and being a complete degenerate, pretending to think things were funny about like pedophilia and all sorts of stuff. Now look, I've made some edgy jokes in my time, but I've never once ever joked about doing something inappropriate with like an underage child that I was related to. The whole thing's disgusting, okay? There is definitely a place where it crosses the line. So yeah, that's this dude here, Shane. That's where I think everybody can agree that neither one of these guys, or at least Shane, because I don't know much about this other dude, should have been able to have a kid. Most people are saying, oh my God, I'm okay with surrogacy, but Shane should not be alone near anyone's kids, like ever. So that brings up the topic of surrogacy commercially. And I say again, I'm going to try to be very brief with my opinion. I want to stay more to facts and let the facts speak for themselves, because it's a very touchy subject. Full disclosure, I've got nieces and nephew that were born via in vitro fertilization, something that I never would have personally done. I don't wish that my niece and nephew didn't exist. I love them. I'm very happy they're here, but it's not something I would have done personally. My wife would not have been okay with that, and neither would I. So again, we'll try to stay away from those topics. I'm just being honest about it. And I have a relative on my side that couldn't have a kid, and they looked at adopting, and it cost them thousands of dollars to eventually not be able to adopt because of paperwork or whatever the problem was. Ended up having their own kid, but it took years of trying. And so I am very sympathetic to people who cannot have kids. I've got people on both sides of my family, my wife and mine, that have struggled with it. It's not something I'm oblivious to. But there's a lot of issues with the surrogacy industry as a whole. So a lot of these articles we'll kind of touch on just some pieces of them, and I'll let the facts speak for themselves. One of them being massive risk to the actual surrogate mother that never gets talked about. The concerns about the child are the obvious one, but what happens to the surrogate afterwards, increased risk of all sorts of things, preeclampsia, cancer, hypertension, tons of issues that could come up because of the procedure of actually having IVF. And again, most countries where they do in vitro fertilization, they're in places like India, where the average surrogate in the United States gets $30,000 to $50,000, maybe if she's lucky. Whereas in India, the entire procedure, including the fee for the surrogate's $12,000. So this is definitely something where people are preying on younger, impoverished women in third world countries where they, and I'm not trying to insult anybody from India, but there are parts of India that are the third world. It's just a fact, where they're preying on these women who don't have any other option. They have no other way of making any money. They have no opportunities. Then there's the rights of the child that never get considered. There are a lot of stories, and you can find them really easily online, about children that struggle knowing that they came from a surrogate household. They are from a surrogate family, essentially. They wanted to know their birth mother. They find out that they are basically a byproduct of a transaction. And for them, they struggle with that. There's a lot of trafficking of people because of the surrogacy industry, where they move people around specifically to harvest the eggs. This is, again, something that they're seeing with the commercial surrogacy industry, where that's affecting not only child trafficking, but trafficking of human trafficking across the board, where now that the surrogacy industry is booming, especially in places like Ukraine. I mean, hell, a ton of Ukrainian women recently in the last few years became surrogates just because they had no other option. Bonding with babies in the womb is one of the most important things that a mother can experience. There are studies and all sorts of research that show how much a child learns about their parents, their mom, their dad, whatever their parental situation is, while they're inside the womb. The sound of their parents' voices, the feel, the touch of their parents from outside the stomach, like just all these things, even learning parts of the language. They're saying that they believe that a child is actually starting their language development while still inside the womb, that they're hearing words that they start to recognize after they're born. On top of the fact that there are a lot of risks to the child. In fact, children born via IVF actually have 3 times more likelihood that they're going to be underweight, malnourished. There's just a lot of risk that has not been assessed yet. And unfortunately, these things are not being considered, because what's being considered is the desire to have children, either out of convenience or out of struggle for the parents who can't conceive. And what we're left with is a bunch of questions with no answers, and everyone's going, oh, it's no big deal, it's fine. In fact, 15 to 20% of surrogates are actually military wives because of the fact that they have a hard time finding jobs. They're constantly moving around. A lot of military spouses are underpaid, and they have medical insurance, so a lot of their medical bills are covered. And so the military wife is the ideal American surrogate. And so you find these people who are poor, broke, living paycheck to paycheck, and you offer them thousands of dollars to take this very risky procedure that doesn't even work out a lot of the time. A lot of times IVF is unsuccessful. A lot of times, especially through IVF pregnancies, children are likely to be born premature. My niece and nephew were born 2.5 months premature. It's very risky, and they went through a lot of surgeries just to survive. It's a very risky procedure. And so you also get into the rights of the child, which are even, to me, a bigger deal as well. And you have situations where the surrogate mother, and again, there are 2 types. You can have the traditional surrogacy where the mother is actually impregnated using her own egg cell, and then you have IVF where it's not her baby. It's completely 2 strangers' egg and sperm cell. But either way, she is the one that is carrying that child. So in her mind, whether it's her egg cell or not, her body's going to react in a way, and her hormones, that's her kid. She's going to feel like she has this desire to protect it, or she won't. Again, everybody's different, but those basic maternal instincts are going to kick in whether she wants them to or not. And you have tons of times where you have these adoptive parents who have paid this surrogate to carry their child, and the minute they find out something is wrong, whether it's Down syndrome, whether it's some sort of health condition, whether it's simply the child is less than ideal in its development, they can terminate essentially the pregnancy at any point. And the surrogate mother has little to no rights on being able to say no. And again, this is a case-by-case basis, but there are documented cases where the mother has had to abort the baby or have been pressured to abort the baby due to the fact that the adoptive parents are now saying, if you don't abort the baby, I'm not going to keep it. There have been people that have left their baby in other countries because it had some condition and they didn't want to raise it. And so the surrogate parents the adoptive parents just said, nope, I'm out. Again, morally reprehensible behavior. So I'm going to leave off with this. This is a theory. This has been fact-checked and debunked or whatever, but it's a video that I actually talked about earlier this year that was put out by, I can't remember who the company was. It's the idea of having a factory full of artificial wombs.
And many others.
And again, just an idea. It's nothing that's been, created yet. But this is essentially the dystopian version of what we're talking about now. This is like the end all of what we're going to see is you're no longer going to have mothers birthing their own babies. You're not going to have mothers raising their own babies, or at least growing them inside them. You're going to have these labs growing these babies and having absolutely no connection to the people that are supposed to be raising them. And then after 9 months, you go pick up your baby. This is going to create a generation full of people who are not emotionally attuned properly. I don't see how this ends well. Like this is going to be insane. And going back to it, if none of this has convinced you that surrogacy at least has some issues, that's fine. I don't need to necessarily change your mind. You don't need to change my mind. We can talk about it without, being assholes about it. But there is definitely the reality that somebody like Shane Dawson never would have been allowed to adopt a child. There would have been some sort of governmental check, some red flag that popped up and said, yeah, this guy, no, he's a no. But he can go and basically purchase a baby for himself. So that's concerning. Let me know what you guys think down below. I stand more on the side of I don't like surrogacy at all. Again, I hate to tell people you can't have a family member be your surrogate. I don't want to be that guy. But as far as the commercial surrogacy is concerned, I find it disgusting. You can disagree, and that's okay. And I'm not trying to be judgmental. I'm just telling you how I feel, and I think that unfortunately there's more harm than good that comes out of it. But let me know what you guys think down below.